What is going on, guys? It's Jono, and today we're building out an AI-powered chatbot. This is so freaking cool because it's trained on the entire history of your company. Take a look at this. So in front of me, I have this conversation, right? It started with this test chatbot where somebody started off the conversation by saying hello, entering their information, and this chatbot automatically starts replying to this person with the goal of getting them onto an appointment. Now, let's go back to this conversation history because what I want to do is first of all show you that this conversation can switch between multiple different mediums. So you see that a text message has now come in, meaning that we switch from live chats to text message. We could also incorporate emails in there or WhatsApp, or we can incorporate Facebook messages, Instagram messages, all of that kind of stuff. The next thing that I want to talk about here is the fact that it literally is trained on the entire history of your company and it's giving responses akin to what you'd expect an employee to deliver. So take a look at this. It's saying, hey, Jono, here are 5 DJs from our team that you might want to check out. Then it lists those actual DJs from our website, and then it will go off to say, here is the average price range depending on the event details, and then it will once again ask to book that appointment. Now, you'll notice here that it's asking to book an appointment because I've trained this AI chatbot to respond to people based on A, where they're at in the customer journey, and B, what the objective is, right? So because this is a new lead, the objective is to get them on a sales call because that's how we're going to close deals. But if this was a client, we may take a different approach where we're trying to solve any questions they may have. Maybe they ask us for something specific like, hey, can you send off a receipt or an invoice? And we can go ahead and do that. Or, hey, can you update this detail on my event? We can also go ahead and do that as well. So there's so many different possibilities for this kind of technology. Now, how this practically works is we're using a system called RAG, which is Retrieval Augmentation Generation. And how this works is we're going to collect content from all across your entire business, like literally the history of your business, and we're saving it into a vector database through a couple steps, and we're going to be walking through this step by step so you understand everything. And then we're retrieving that data from the vector database. So let's actually break that down. So because it is kind of a bit confusing, what that means is we're storing things from everywhere across your footprint online, right? So think about Notion. You might have standard operating procedures in Notion. No worries, we can grab this information and we can save it in our vector database. And then we can grab information from your emails. So think about the tone of voice you use, think about how you write emails, how you respond to emails. We can save all of that data in a vector database and retrieve it like an email, just like this, right? The next thing is we can save documents from like PandaDoc, for example. PandaDoc is a contract and invoice and proposal generator just like this. We can take these documents that you're sending off to clients and save it in your vector database as well. And we can also take data from your website, right? So take my website, for example. We have like probably 500 pages here, and we're just going to web scrape every single one of those pages and store that in this vector database. So practically speaking, you can think about it almost like an Airtable, right? So we take all that data, we're going to load into this Airtable, things like emails, documents, things like websites. And as soon as that information comes into Airtable, then what we're going to do is we're going to use make.com to store that information from Airtable into the vector database of our choice, which is Pinecone. Pinecone is the vector database. It's essentially a really cool software that allows you to, that's pretty much what it does. Vector database. And then essentially, lastly, we can retrieve that data from when we receive text messages, just like this, right? We'll retrieve that message and then we'll essentially query the vector database, retrieve the best answer. And then we're going to essentially send a message back. And how we're doing all of this, practically speaking, is through a lot of different software applications. The main one here is make.com. Now, this is make.com in front of me. If you guys are new to using this, no worries. We're going to be taking this step by step so that even if you don't have really any knowledge about this, you should still be able to get through this 100%. The blueprints are going to be down below for free. If you do want to import these straight in, all you have to do is download the blueprints for free, hit these 3 dots here, and then import the blueprint in. You should have a JSON file in the blueprints. All you do is select it, save it, and then you are good to go. If you guys want a crash course on make.com, I'll link it up above here where I walk through everything you need to know about make.com from start to finish. So with that being said, guys, let's dive into this right now. All right, so the first thing that I want to dive into here is the first part of this RAG system where we actually need to locate content on in your business, and we need to store this inside of a vector database, right? And this content can come in many forms. It can come in the form of Notion databases. It can come in the form of emails, such as this. It can come in the form of documents, such as a PandaDoc agreement, or in terms of web scraping content off of your website, right? Now, there's a lot. This is just covering a few places where you can receive this information. And I'm going to leave most of these in the blueprint because, and we'll go through these together. But the two that I want to talk about today and build out today are getting data off of your website. And also it's going to be from getting emails into the database as well, right? And then we'll link the other ones in the blueprints so you can just download and use it pretty much right off the bat. So how we're going to go about doing this is we're going to use make.com. If you haven't done so already, you can over to make.com and you can sign up for a free account, and we're going to create a new scenario. Now, in this new scenario, what we need to do is essentially the first workflow we're going to do is find information from places like our website. So we're going to start with web scraping first. Now, you could go through every page, page by page, and scrape off like every single word, but that would take you like 2 years. I'm just kidding. I don't know how long it would take, but it would be a very, very long and boring process. I couldn't think of many more boring things to do. And we can do this automatically in a couple minutes. So how we're going to do that is by using something called Apify. Now, what Apify is another piece of technology we're using. It's a web scraping platform. So it will allow you to web scrape your entire website, grab all the information in pretty much, well, automatically. So you can sign up for free. It is free to get started. Of course, they do have paid plans, but I think for the majority of you out there, you should be able to get this done for free. They give you $5 of free credits every single month. Usually it's like maybe $5 per 1,000 scrapes on average. So, you know, as long as your website's not over 1,000 pages, you should be good to go, and this does reset every single month. So we're going to head into the store on Apify, and really we just want this first one here, the website content crawler by Apify, right? And essentially this is all we need to do. I'm first of all just going to restore the default inputs here just so that what I see is exactly what you will see. And essentially there's not too much we actually have to do here. So again, Apify will help us web scrape our own website. So all we really have to do to get this started is to enter in the URL address of our website. In my case, I'm just going to use my company, djang.ca. And all we need to do from there is just go down and choose one more setting, and that is max pages here. So it says max pages optional. This is under the crawler settings, and we're just going to choose 5 for now. And the reason why is we want to limit the number of pages that we're going to web scrape to 5. So I have 500 on my page, but I'm only taking 5 now because we're just going through the testing process, and I don't want to web scrape 500 results and then blow through all of my free usage here and then realize, crap, I made a mistake, and then come back and do it again and make a mistake, and then I don't have any data to scrape pages. So let's just keep it easy for now. Let's make sure we iron out all the kinks, and then we can really ramp this up. Now, the next thing that I want to do here is just come down and save before we run, okay? And the reason why I want to save is because if we come back into our scenario here, we should be able to actually access that particular actor, right? So in order to see it in make.com, we need to save it. So in Apify, we're going to click into Apify and we're going to watch actor runs here. So anytime one of these actors here, and this is called an actor or a fancy way of saying a web scraper. Anytime this web scraper runs, we're going to receive the results. So what we need to do is we need to first of all add a webhook here, right? So first things first, you'll need to add your account in here. In order to add an account, you need to first of all name it, and then you have to pull in your API token. You can get your API token from settings down here, and then once you go into settings, there's just like an API tab up here, and you'll be able to access it pretty much immediately. And just make sure to name this, otherwise you're going to have potentially down the road many connections with the same name, and you're going to hate yourself for doing that. So just make sure to name it. And then what we'll do is we'll just select the right account here, and from there all we have to do is just choose the the right actor, right? And how we can do that is just copying this actor in and then paste it over here, and we're good to go. So we've chosen the right actor. I'm just going to name this test rag system, and we're going to go ahead and save. Okay, so we're good to go. just before we run this, I just want to do one more modification here, and we're going to do another module. It's going to be Appify, and we're going to get data set items. The reason why we're choosing get data set items is because the team at Appify, for whatever reason, they decided, how can we make this as complicated as possible? Why would we return the results on the run when we could just have two modules to do what we could otherwise do in one? So they decided to, I'm just being facetious here, they decided to separate it out into two modules. So this will just like tell you, hey, this run has been successful. And then in this module, we actually need to get the results. And how we do that is we can just type up at the top here, default dataset ID. Make sure not to confuse this with the ID of the actor, or else it's not going to work. We'll click OK, save this, and we're just going to run. The run button is just where my face is blocking. And we're now waiting for the web scraper to start, right? So we're going to go ahead, come back to Appify, and we're going to run these results here, right? And usually when we're dealing with web scrapers, it can take a minute or two to get these results, but you can see it's working because the memory down here has now gone up to the maximum. So this web scraper is now working in the background to get us some results. Now, I'm going to open up a new tab while we're waiting here, and I'm going to create a new scenario. Now, this is totally optional if you guys want to, but if you guys were to say want to scrape your website once a month, because maybe you're adding a ton of different pages, you can just come into Appify and you can choose run an actor. And again, you can just choose to run that particular actor. So you'd set up, your connection up here, you choose the same actor as before, and I believe it would be this one. And yeah, we could run this. And the only thing we need to choose is the interval that we want to run this at. And this interval here, and you'll see that it doesn't let me choose this just because it's not saved yet. So just make sure to save the scenario. And maybe we run this at intervals where it's like, once every days of the month, we can choose the first, right? And then on the first of every single month, it's going to run. Now, that's essentially how you can set it up to scrape your website at any given time. The only thing with this is we just need to add in the input JSON to make this work. So back in Appify, we're going to go back to actors here, and the JSON data here is located right here. So where it says manual, we switch to JSON, and we just copy all of this in, paste it, and click OK and save this scenario. And once every single month, this actor will run, right? And then we're going to receive the data. And then, of course, we're going to use this data to push it into something like Airtable, right? So circling back to the runs here, we're going to take a look and see that we've currently received 5 results. We just got 5. It says it's finishing, and we've seen success. So perfect. In a couple seconds now, this actor here should be completed. And you'll notice that it doesn't actually give the run like I was mentioning earlier, right? It just says, hey, the status has succeeded, and this is the time it's done at, and it gives you all this other data that you're probably never going to look at again or use. So that is where this get dataset item comes in. And now we have these 5 bundles. So these bundles represent each one of your website pages. So if we come into one of these and we go to text, this is all of the text of one of those pages, right? And you'll notice here that it says this crawler is good to extract content and feeds to feed AI models, large language applications, and vector databases or RAG pipelines, which is exactly what it is we are using this for. So now that we have this data, what I want to do is I want to put it to use, and I want to insert this into Airtable. Now, Airtable is like a one-to-one substitute for Google Sheets. This is the only paid application that you guys are going to have to use for this system to work. It should cost you $20 a month because we need a specific piece of functionality in Airtable. So I'm going to get into that in a bit later when I reach that step. But for now, I'm just letting you know that there is going to be a price associated with this. So now that we have this data here, what we're going to do is we're going to push this into Airtable. Now, if you guys haven't done so already, you're going to have to go into Airtable, create a database, and then have like a blank sheet, right? So I'm just going to use this one just because I already have all of the data in here. And just go ahead and create something new. And the next step we're going to do here is we're going to choose Airtable. Now, the first thing that I want to do is I want to essentially search records here. Okay, and this is a two-step process where we want to search the record. And if that record does not exist, then we want to create it. But if it exists, we want to update it. So take a look at like something like this. We don't want to enter in duplicates. We don't want two of the same contracts. We don't want two of the same website pages. We don't want two of the same emails. We want to avoid that at all costs, right? So how we do that is by cleaning up and keeping the hygiene intact. So first we're going to search, and if it exists, then we're going to update it. If it doesn't exist, then we're going to create it. So first things first, we're going to search for this item. And actually what I'm going to do is I think I'm just going to start this again from the ground up, just because I think it's going to be a bit easier to be able to walk through this with you guys here. So we're going to go back to Airtable, and I'm going to essentially create another, select workspace. I'm going to create another database here. Okay, sweet. Perfect. So first things first, I'm actually just going to copy in what I had in the previous workspace here. So I'm just going to actually go back and just make sure that I get everything here just to set it up for success. So we have a couple fields here. First things first, we have ID, and this is good to be text. And then we have the date. And I'm going to choose edit field here. This is going to be a date field, and we're going to choose date from the dropdown. Next one, we have the file type. Okay, and this is just essentially like, is it a website? Is it a document? Like, what is the actual file? Or where are we getting this information from? It doesn't have to just be file type, I guess. This is just, I guess we can call this source actually. Okay, sweet. And this is going to be a drop down. So single select here. And we have a couple different options. For now, I'm just going to choose two, and it's going to be website and email. So first option is going to be website, and second option is going to be email. Okay, perfect. And finishing up here, we got the message, which is like the content of that particular website page, right? So all the details of that, or all the text on the page will be here. This will be a long text answer. And then we have URL, file, and uploaded. So we're gonna go ahead and add URL. This is gonna be single line of, actually we can choose URL here. Perfect, create the field. Next one, file. And this is gonna be attachment. Perfect. And last one is going to be uploaded. And this is going to be a checkbox. So essentially, this is just letting us know, hey, has this file been uploaded to the RAG system, or has it not been uploaded to the RAG system, which is Pinecone in this example. So we have our mock database here, and all we need to do is add data from this web scrape into this Airtable database right here. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's do that. So first things first, I'm going to actually just make sure I'm using the right connection here. And then we're gonna search for the base, right? We wanna use this. I'm gonna call this rag test. And we'll come back and we'll find that in our system. We're just gonna refresh this because it didn't pull it in. Okay, maybe we need to create another connection here. So we're gonna do Airtable OAuth, save. And we're just gonna essentially connect in Airtable here and choose the right base, which is going to be this rag test database here. We're gonna grant access so that we can now start searching and updating and doing all of that kind of stuff in this particular database that we just created here, right? So now we have access to that database, and we're going to search for the records. So first things first is we're going to grab table 1, which is essentially, this table right here. And then what we want to do is we want to pull in the ID field, right? And so the formula here for this ID field is going to be ID equals, and then we're going to pass in the ID on this web scrape. But you'll see that the ID might not even exist here. It doesn't look like it does. So we need a unique identifying field. And what that unique identifying field is the URL in this case. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to use the URL instead. And this is how we're going to find that field. And we're going to check, does it exist or does it not exist, right? So this is the particular syntax in Airtable to look for a particular field. Okay, the limit is going to be set to 1 because there should only be one field. We're only ever going to have one. It's either, we should never have duplicate data in here. And then lastly, what we're going to do here is we're going to do Airtable and we're going to choose upsert. Now, upsert creates or updates an existing record. So in either instance, you'll either create it or you will update it here. So the next thing here is we'd actually need to choose the frickin' account, and looks like I made it incredibly difficult for myself by not naming this properly. So we have one of two options here, and I believe it's going to be the second one. So hopefully, fingers crossed, this actually works because I clearly didn't name it properly. We're going to have to update the permissions here, click continue, and choose the base. And this is going to be reg test grant access. And we're going to be able to now complete this particular workflow. So again, base reg test. And now we're just updating the content from the web scrape into Airtable. So we're going to choose the correct table again. And in this instance, we need to enter in the record ID, which is the ID here. But the thing is we want to make sure that that record is either exists, and if it doesn't exist, then we pass it in as being empty. So what we're going to do is we're going to choose this if empty here. And I'm just structuring this because I don't want Airtable to throw any errors in case there's no data or whatnot, right? So we choose ID here. And if not in the second field, what we're going to choose is we're going to choose an empty string. So let's walk through this. So if empty, what's going to happen is it's going to check to see if this ID exists. And if it does, it's going to put the ID. If we check it and that it's unknown and it doesn't exist, then we're going to enter in the empty string instead, right? Which will avoid throwing an error. And then we can just go ahead and update the rest of this particular Airtable module here. So we're going to choose the ID here. We'll choose the date, which is going to be a function. So we're going to go to time and we'll select now. The source is going to be website, or we can just unmap this and choose website here. The message is going to be the actual, let's see here, text from that website. So we'll choose text here, URL will be URL, and that looks good to me. Uploaded is no, because we haven't put it into Pinecone yet. So we're going to click save and we're going to run this, right? And now what's going to happen is if we start this actor again, all of these modules or all of these website pages are actually going to be imported automatically into our database. So this is essentially part one of this whole workflow done, is how do we get data into our particular database. Now, I mentioned that I was going to go over emails as well, where we essentially load in emails too, right? So we're going to go through this workflow next, and then just essentially the other ones like Notion or the other ones like Documents. I'll just link these down below in the description. You can grab the blueprints and use these. The only reason I want to use particularly emails in this instance is because this is actually really important to get right. If you don't set this up properly, it's going to cost you a ton of money. So circling back here, as this is waiting, we're actually going to start another workflow here. I'm going to call this reg test Appify scrape. Okay, perfect. And we're also going to name this one up top here as well. This is going to be reg test Appify results. Perfect. And now I'm going to choose this next scenario. I'm going to create another scenario here. Save changes. And this one is going to be dealing with emails. Now, I'm just going to start off by naming this as well, reg test email. The thing is you might be tempted to go to like emails and watch for emails. Problem with something like this is that you're going to be charged every single operation to do this. And if you run this, like let's say you get 400 or 1,000 emails a day, let's just say you're going to be paying 1,000 operations. And long term, it's just going to cost a lot. If you have 50 employees in your team, you're not going to be wanting to spend the money. These operations can add up scarily fast. Like this particular module here, is going to probably cost you more operations than your entire Make account combined, right? This one thing here, this one particular thing. And the reason why this happens this way is because with this particular module, what's happening is you're running it at regular intervals, whether it's every 15 minutes, every single day, whatever. Even if you were to slow this down so that it's every day, then it's only going to pull in however many emails you set here. So if it's one, you're going to use one operation per day. But if you used 100 operations, then you'd be potentially using all those operations as well. So one way to get around this is to set up something called a mail hook. And let's go over this together. So mail hook is kind of like a webhook where you receive information, but you're specifically receiving information from your email. What this practically means is that instead of you having to spend money, like maybe like 1,000 operations a day, you're only spending operations when an email actually comes into your particular account, right? So let's go ahead and set this up. We're going to add a module here. We're going to call this reg email test. I'm going to save this. And now we have this URL. And essentially what we want to do is set up a forwarding address so that all emails come to this URL. I'm going to save this and run this module because we're going to have to circle back. Now in our email, what we're going to do in Gmail is we're going to go to settings here. We're going to go see all settings. And then we're going to go to forwarding and pop/IMAP. And we're going to add a forwarding address and we're going to add in that particular URL that we just got from make.com. And there's going to be a security check in here where it's going to forward emails to that particular location, at which point in time a forwarding email has been sent off. So we can click OK, we'll circle back and we've received that authentication email. In the text here, what we can do is we can just copy this URL and then paste it into the browser and click confirm. And what that's going to do is it's going to authenticate forwarding to this address, which means that every single time you receive email in this inbox should be able to be forwarded over to this webhook. Now, I'm just going to do one last thing here where I'm going to refresh because for whatever reason, you just have to refresh for this to work effectively. We're going to go back, see all settings, and we just have to set this up properly to make sure that we're sending it off to the right address here, which is, because I have a couple here, so it's this last option here. And then we're going to save changes. And now what's going on is every single time email comes in, then we're sending it off. So I'm going to see if I can even send an email to myself here and just see if it's actually accepted in this webhook. We'll click OK, run once, and send. And let's see if this actually receives a message that I sent myself from my own email address. If not, as this is waiting, I'm actually going to send an email from my phone here and just try and get it to, oh, okay, there we go. It worked. So we received this message in. And essentially, you know, this is a great first step. We just need to do exactly what we did here, right? So we're going to take that email and we're going to put it into our database. Now, circling back here, I just want to take a look and see if this reg system actually worked. And you can see that, this automation worked. You can see that the modules actually did go into Airtable. So in fact, we do have everything in here, which is really, really great as a good start, right? The only thing here is that it didn't come in with an ID because the ID didn't exist. All we have to do in order to combat that is we can just delete this because it's an empty field. And if we want to create a unique ID, we can use a UUID field here. What this essentially does is it's just a unique identifier. This will be a unique ID that it generates every single time. And yeah, so that's pretty cool stuff. Okay, great. So that's good to go. Every result forward will have that universal ID here. And then circling back to this email, what we're going to do here is we're going to just essentially enter that email into the workflow here. So I'm going to copy these modules here, and I'm actually going to paste it over here, and we're going to tie this into the workflow, and more or less exact same thing. we can do here. But this time, what I want to do is I want to do ID equals, and then we'll have like an ID here. So let's choose an ID field from this, and we'll do message ID here. And essentially what this is going to check is, hey, does this ID contain the message ID of the email, which it should be unique every single time. And if it does, then it will update it. If it doesn't, it'll create a new version. Okay, great. So coming back here, what we're going to do, same kind of deal, but we're just going to replace the ID with the ID here. And there should be no URL here. And that looks good to go. That means that every single time an email comes in, it's going to be automatically entered in to this workflow. Just one more thing that I want to copy over here is this ChatGPT module here. And the reason I'm doing this is because I want to make sure that with the emails, we're just removing any HTML or anything like that from them so that we're not adding in like H2 tags or paragraph tags. It's just plain text that we're adding in here. And you can see that in the prompt here, it says you're an AI assistant specializing in processing raw email. Your task is to clean up the provided email content based on these requirements. Remove any HTML tags, signatures, all of that kind of stuff. This will be in the blueprints for free to download if you guys want to use this. And the only thing we have to do is just pass in the text from module 1. So email comes in, it cleans up the email, and then we're going to use the results from this ChatGPT module, and we're going to place it into the message field here instead. So effectively, the body of the email comes in, then it's going to be cleaned up here, and then it's going to be placed in this particular record here. Right? So we can go ahead and we can just send one more email to ourselves and just make sure that we actually received that email again. So I'm just going to come back in here, type the same email, test2, and send it off. And let's see if this works properly. It's just a couple seconds lag between actually receiving the email and having it start this workflow here. But just give it a couple seconds. Okay, there we go. It's going to process through ChatGPT. The result pulls it out, and then we have our database updated here. And you'll notice that it says website, which is obviously not ideal. It did enter in the ID. So all I have to do is come back here and change this to from website over to email, and then we're good to go. And that is the first part completely done. So now we have a place or sources to retrieve data from, right? We're retrieving data from our website. This could be hundreds of different pages on our company. And then we're also receiving data from our particular emails as well. And then we're going to pass that into the Airtable. Now let's move on to the second of 3 workflows. This is probably the most time consuming to set up. The other 2 are going to be, I think, don't quote me on it, but I think they'll be a bit faster. So we're going to create a new scenario here. And this is going to be, we're going to name this again, rag test add vector database. And this is a bit technical. We're going to be walking through this together. So essentially, what we need to do in this scenario is we need to make sure that when data from our rag database here, when data is entered here, we automatically upload it to Pinecone. Okay. And, you know, you could just have this workflow built into the backs of all these other ones. The reason I don't do that is because I want it to be modular. I don't want to have to reconstruct this workflow for like 10 different inputs. So I wouldn't want it to be for every time I get something in Notion and every time I get something from email and then DocuSign or PandaDoc and you know, the website. I just want all of these these data collection points to feed into one specific workflow that, you know, takes care of everything. So it's lean, it's modular, and it's easy to maintain. So how we do this is we need to start with something called a webhook, which is similar to the mail hook, right? And what this is doing is we're just receiving data. And the data we're receiving is from Airtable. So I'm going to go ahead and add a webhook here, and I'm just going to call this rag test Airtable. Okay, click save. Now we need to get data from Airtable to send into this particular workflow. So how are we going to do this? And you might also be thinking, well, doesn't Airtable have like the ability to do that? And the answer is no, it doesn't at this time, right? You can watch responses, watch records, but that is neither going to help us out. So how we do this is we go over to Airtable and we go into automations here. And we have to create our own automation, right? And so essentially how this works is I'm just going to, let's see, automation 1. I'm going to create an automation here. We're going to start from scratch. So we're going to add a trigger, and this is going to be when a record is created. So when a row is added, when a website page is added into the system, when email is added into the system, it will fire this particular automation. So this automation starts, right? And then there's just one more step, and that step is sending data from Airtable back into this webhook here in make.com so that we can push it into the vector database. So how we do this is we're going to add another step, and this step is going to be running a script here. Okay, perfect. So let me try and break this down. This does require a bit of code, but this is essentially how we connect Airtable into make.com. So we have an input variable here. This input variable I'm just going to call ID, and we're going to associate an actual value to this ID. So this is a key value pair. The key, how we reference the value, is ID. So anytime we reference ID, it will pull in the value that we're placing here. The value is the Airtable record ID. So every row has a record, and we just want to find the row ID. Okay, and so essentially, first thing that I want to do here is and that's it. This is like the only variable that we're going to put in. We're going to add another line here, and we're going to walk through this. I'm going to explain how this is working because I hate just telling you guys to do something but not actually explaining, and then you're just looking at being like, I have no idea how this works. So what we're going to do is we're going to declare a variable here. This is just essentially like for us to recall at a later point in time and be able to leverage down the road in programming. And all this is going to be is it's going to be input.config, right? It kind of says it here. Use input variables in your coding. And then what we can do is just console.log the data.id. And let's just test this out because I want to see how this runs. So we can just test on any random record here, and we should get the ID of that row here. So let's just take a look and see. It should output it on the side here. Okay, sweet. So we received it. Now this is the ID of any random row, and this will always change. Row 1 will have a different ID than row 2, which will have a different ID than row 3, which will have a different ID than row 4. And essentially, we just need to pass this ID here into this workflow here, right? So all we're doing again is we're just declaring a variable here with a key value pair. So key is ID, and this is going to be the record ID or the row ID. And then we're essentially just declaring a variable here called data, which is input.config. And when we log data.id, it gives us that exact record here. Now from here, we just have to write one last piece of code, and it's going to be a fetch request. And essentially from this, we're just sending this data to this URL here. So we have the URL here, and we're just going to paste this in. Keep in mind, there is backticks here, okay? Can't really zoom in much more, but you have backticks. These aren't regular ticks, but essentially this is a template literal, which means that we can add additional content in here. What that means is we're going to add in some additional values here. We're going to do ID equals and then data.id. So we're passing data from here, and then we're also entering in additional content here, which is the ID equals data ID. So we're passing in this. So when we run this, and I think it's just better if I just go ahead and show you this, but when we run this test here, and we come back, this should fire, and now we have that ID, right? And it's under the key ID. So if we circle back here, we have the URL here, and then it says ID. This ID here is the same ID as the key here. We declared that ID, that key here, which we found here. And then the value is the data ID variable here, and that is right here. Okay, so now we have passed data in to make.com from our Airtable database. We can finish editing this and turn this automation on. Anytime we have a new row, it's going to automatically start this workflow and pass data straight into here, right? Now what we want to do is take that ID and find the rest of the data. So we're going to choose Airtable, and we're going to get a record. And all we have to do in this instance is just, first of all, choose the right Airtable database. Fingers crossed, hopefully this is the correct one. I could have picked the wrong one here. Okay, looks good. We have the reg test, which is, again, our database that we just added here, which is right here. And we have table here. And the record ID is the ID that we just passed in from the webhook here, right? So again, result comes in, row is added, fires that script, passes the ID back in here, and then all of a sudden we can retrieve the rest of the data in this get record Airtable. So practically speaking, if I just come in here and I just add another row, it should fire off, right? And oops, I didn't run this workflow. So let's just add a new row, and hopefully this fires. Maybe it didn't because I didn't add it in properly here. But anyways, that should work. We just need to get data in here now. So how we can do this is, let me see here. I'm just going to actually run this module, and I'm just going to put in some random results here and click OK. Oops. Run this module only and click OK here. And we have our result coming in. And now a new row should have been created, which then automatically updates this webhook here. Gotcha. I didn't update this, so I updated it on the wrong Airtable database. So I'm going to go ahead and pause this video and redo this. Okay, so I just went ahead and I fixed the database to make sure that the automation was actually linked to the right table. And then I also came in and tested it out, and we have the results. So we got the ID coming in from the webhook, and then we just used that ID to find the rest of the data here. Which is pretty cool, right? So that is the first step of this done. Now what I want to do is I want to move forward, and we need to actually enter this into the particular vector database here, right? So let's go ahead and let's do this. I'm just going to focus on, I guess, this upper path here, and then I'll include in the blueprints this lower path. Essentially what this lower path does is it allows you to take documents like a PDF file like this, and then it will allow you to break that into text, so convert that PDF to text, and then upload that text in. So it converts files that aren't automatically text, like a PDF, into text to insert into Pinecone, right? So I'm actually just going to go ahead, I'm going to copy the rest of this, and I'm going to paste this into our workflow here. I'm going to attach this onto the end, and then we're going to walk through this together. Now, the first thing here is that I just created this massive replace list that I got from ChatGPT, and essentially what we're doing here is we're trying to remove any particular special characters like line breaks or anything like that, any excessive use of like specific characters. So for example, if we went like this, we're trying to remove that. We're trying to remove emojis. We're trying to remove URLs and all that kind of stuff. And so I just put this into ChatGPT. And the reason why I did it this way is because when we go towards embedding, and uploading into Pinecone, we're going to explain this in a second here. We just want to make sure that we're not using any of these special characters because we don't want to break the embedding process or break the process of uploading documents into the vector database, right? So this is just like a precautionary way of preventing any special characters that might break the code from entering in, and that is why we have this. The only thing we need to do here is we just need to make sure that we add in the message so that we're receiving the message from Airtable, and then then that's going to automatically be passed through. Now let's talk about this next step here, which is embedding, right? Essentially what we're doing here, and I'm just going to go back to my nifty little my nifty little PowerPoint presentation, is we're taking content and we're embedding that in ChatGPT's embedding model, right? So we have effectively, we're making an external, or we're making an API call. So if I was to go into like ChatGPT here and then come in, we could just scroll down to the bottom and make an API call, right? So that's what I've clicked here. And we're going to this endpoint, which is /v1/embeddings. And effectively what we're doing is we're having a post, which we're sending data to it. And we're just specifying the header, content type, JSON application, and we're adding in this data here, which has 3 parameters: input equals text, model equals text, embedding 3. This is just telling it, hey, this is the model we're actually trying to send data to, and this is the encoding format. I don't really understand what that is. But in terms of the input here, we're just removing all those special characters and passing it in. So let's talk about what this embedding model is, because I think it's quite confusing, and I just want to walk through at least my perception of it and kind of give you a good analogy. So data collection and retrieval for customer queries, right? So the first thing we're doing is we're actually just collecting data, which we walked through in the first step for many places like your website or your CRM or documents, email, social media, all that kind of stuff. And then we're embedding it. So the embedding process is like taking a photo of something and turning it into a special code or pattern that shows its shape, color, or feel, so that computers know how to compare it to other things. So we're just breaking down all this data into like codes, and like it's like a 10-digit number, numerical code. And then those codes, effectively what they do is allows these vector databases to understand, okay, well, this code is very similar to this code based on all these different variables, right? And it can essentially allow you to find related or similar topics, right? So dog and cat are very similar because they're both animals, but like an avocado and a dog would be very different, right? So it's just scoring them based on how compatible they are with one another, so that you can retrieve information that is very similar to one another. So this is the encoding process that we're doing right now, right? And then the next process is actually storing that in the particular Pinecone database, right? And you can think of it like a vector database that stores special kinds of pictures or numbers that show what things look like to a computer. So it helps the computer find similar things super fast, like matching socks in a drawer. You know, when you're doing your laundry and you're like, crap, like I got all these different socks. For me, this is like my least favorite thing to do, but like matching socks. But like you have some big, some small, and you're just essentially making sure that they all match together, right? So you can think about like the vector database's role as doing that. And in this particular instance, we're passing in the vector database ID, which we're just retrieving. This is actually something that we have to fill in, but we're just retrieving this from like the ID of the particular Airtable database. This can be whatever ID it is that you want, but I like the ID of the database here because this is always going to be a unique value, right? So if we come into the data here, given we set this up properly, which we changed these, so these will all have unique IDs. Now we're just passing those IDs into this database here, and we can also place the ID of the Airtable database as the string here. And sorry, this database ID here is not actually the ID represented here, it's the ID of the actual row. And then lastly, what we can do is we can just add the content of the message here, right? So in our database, we have this message here, and you can see like this is a website page that I stripped off my site, removed all the HTML. This is just the text now, and I can just essentially add that message in here, right? And it's going to upload that entire website page into my vector database. So I can click OK, and then we're pretty much good to go. It's going to upload it into Pinecone. But let me just back up here and explain this because I forgot to actually connect this in. So in order to get this to work, you're going to have to go to pinecone.io and you have to log in to an account, right? Or sign up if you haven't done so already. Now, I already have an account, so I'm just going to log in to retrieve it. And all we have to do here is we have to, in the database indexes, just create an index here. And I'm just going to call this rag test. Okay, and we want to use this text embedding 3 model because it is the same model that we used in our embedding formula down here, right? So we use the text embedding 3 small, and we're going to use the same one here. And then we can pretty much leave everything else alone, right? Cloud provider, region, that all looks good to me. And I'm just going to go ahead and press cancel because I already actually have a vector database. And then we're going to come in here, and effectively all you have to do is just grab this particular host here, right? So everything after the http:// and before the .pinecone.io, we're going to copy that, and then we're going to paste that back in Pinecone. So how we do this is just add. We're going to put the index name here. Okay, and then we're going to grab the API key, and the API key should be in the API key section right here. So we'll just create an API key, use that, paste in here, and then we're good to go. And that's essentially how we can connect in this Pinecone module right away. Now, also, if you guys haven't done so already and you're using ChatGPT, I should have mentioned this earlier on, but you will have to subscribe to the API usage. You have to put in a limit of $5 and then you pay per credit. So that should be able to last you a long time if you're just getting started out. But this is a different plan than just logging into like ChatGPT, for example. And lastly, just before we set this this workflow up, all I want to do here is I just want to update the record in Airtable just to notify us like, hey, this has been uploaded, and we have this checkbox here when it's been done. And so circling back here, all I want to do is just select the right database. And in order to do that, I have to select the right account and then the right database. And we're just going to check that as being complete. So table 1 looks good to me. Let's just see. Okay. And then we'll select the right ID, which is from this module here. And finally, all we have to do is just choose yes for uploaded. And then we'll click OK and save, right? And now this is the second workflow done. And I'm going to delete this filter here. And now we have successfully added things into Airtable, and those things that were added into Airtable now are going to automatically be added into Pinecone. So I can circle back here and I can run this module, and we can wait for new data. And I'm just going to send myself another email here. So I'm going to send myself another email, test 1, 2, 3, send that. And what's going to happen first is we're going to wait for that response to be triggered in this reg email module. And once that email is received, then it's going to push it into Airtable in a couple seconds here after we've cleaned up the email. And then you can see that it was added in here. And then what's going to happen is it's going to start this workflow, and then it's going to add that into the vector database here. And then it should go back and it should notify us, hey, this has been uploaded and it's been successful, right? So obviously that is very, very cool. And that is the second part of this workflow being done. And then the third part of this workflow is the last stage that we actually need to build out. And this is actually replying to messages. So what that practically looks like is this right here, right? So essentially what we want to do is just be able to reply to emails, reply to text messages, all of that kind of stuff. So let's go ahead and let's build out this third part of our workflow here, right? And so with this third part, what we're going to do here is create another workflow. So if I circle back into what it kind of looks like, it's something more or less along the lines of this. So let's just talk about this and then let's build it afterwards. What's going on here is we're having to receive messages via a webhook. Now, receiving messages via a webhook, the reason it's a webhook here is because we want to build this in a way where there could be multiple inputs and we have one system to handle all of those inputs. An input could be text messages. An input could be a chat widget. WhatsApp messages, Facebook messages, Instagram messages, emails, all of these things, right? And we don't want to build out a separate workflow every single time we have to have, another input. So we just want to have one lean system that works for whatever input we give it. So in this instance, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we will choose a webhook response. And that was clearly not the right one. Webhook, custom webhook. And first thing we're going to do is we're going to call this reg test and save this, okay? And we have this URL. So now we can send messages from other inputs to this. And so if we come back here, okay, what we can do is we can actually just generate an HTTP response and send data from our emails into here. So remember how this receives incoming emails. We add it to the Airtable database, but then we can then send that email over to our third workflow here to reply back by email. And so let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to set up a HTTP request here, and this is going to be just making a request, right? You can see make a request. And quite simply, we want to send data from this input being email over to this response so that we can formulate an email response and send it back. So how we do this is we put in the URL, the webhook URL here. So what's going on is we're sending data from this HTTP request to this endpoint here, which is this workflow here. And so we can click run once and we can simply test this out. We just need to add a couple more things. Now, first of all, the method is post. This is like computer programming jargon. There's a lot of different methods you can choose, but in post, you're posting, you can think of it like a postman. You're delivering mail to somebody's front door. You are sending information from where you are to where you want it to go. And in this case, we're posting data or sending data from this workflow into this third workflow here. And we want to add information to this webhook. We want to provide information like maybe the subject line, maybe the email, so that we know how to reply back to that. The easiest way, there's a bunch of different ways we can add this data. Easiest one is the URL encoded form. It's just key value pairs that you can add in here. So let's just go through a couple of these. First is going to be name of the person. So, and then the second one is going to be email. Third one is going to be subject line. Fourth is going to be the message body. Fifth one is going to be the type of message. And this is just going to be email for now. And then we can also, and we'll touch on these three later on, but we want to have thread ID. We want to have something called customer stage here. And we want to have objective. And we're going to touch on these three later. But for now, I'm just going to randomly throw variables in here because we will be testing this quite a bit of times. So I'm going to say Jono, email is going to be this email here, .com. And the subject line will be, hey, I'm looking for pricing about your services. And lastly, the message body is probably going to be something like, hey, can you give me a ballpark range on your wedding DJ service prices? Okay, sweet. So we can click OK. And the reason I'm hard coding it again, this should be all custom values, but we're going to be testing this over and over and over again. To save time, we're just going to hard code the values. So all we have to do is right click this and run once, and it's going to send immediately every time with those hard coded values. And then we'll circle back at the end and change it. Okay, so we have successfully received the messages. Now, the first thing that we want to do is we want to actually query our vector database to pull this out. But in order to do that, we have a couple steps in the meantime. Now, to speed this up, I'm just going to actually copy this ChatGPT widget or this module over, and then I'm going to explain what's going on here. And so in this, we need to formulate a search response, and we need to encode that right into a model and then search for it like we did before. So we are going to receive the email, the content. We need to encode it in a specific way to interact with the database and then pull the information back out of it. And so how we did this is we set up a OpenAI ChatGPT completion here. I just used the ChatGPT for a latest model, and we have, and you can choose whatever model you want here, but I have 3 messages: developer or system message, a user message, and assistant message. Let's break down what these are. System message is just providing context to the chatbot to explain what the hell is actually going on here. The user message is just the parameters you're putting in there to tell ChatGPT what the question is and what you're looking for specifically. And then the assistant message is just what is the response that you want back? Like, how do you want us to formulate the response? So in the system message, we're just giving context saying you're an AI assistant designed to generate highly effective and precise search terms based on the content of a newly received message. That message could be an email, text message, whatever, right? And essentially what we want you to do is to analyze all the information, and then we want you to be able to give queries or search terms back, and you can list multiple and just separate them out by a comma. And so this is the information that we need ChatGPT to process. Again, all of this is going to be in the blueprints for free, so you guys don't have to pause and like frantically write it down. You can just download the blueprints and receive it right away. So we're just putting in the subject line, the message body, and the message type. Again, this can change based on if it's a text message, an email, or whatever. And then here is the response that we're looking to have back. You need to mention it's JSON data, and we are structuring it in JSON format with a query. The response format here, we have to specify it's a JSON object, and we also want to parse JSON response. Parsing JSON response makes it so that we can actually use this information, like name equals Jono, email equals this. If we didn't do that, it would just reply back with like this JSON in the form of a text. So it'd be like result equals this, which is obviously not what we want. Okay, so that's essentially it. We're going to click OK and save this, right? And so if we were to run this module once and we were to send data over, let's take a look at the results that we get here. So in these results, we have the query. So it's looking for wedding DJ service prices, ballpark range for wedding DJ services, wedding DJ price information, which is pretty good. And so the next step that we want to do here is we want to actually embed this using ChatGPT. Now, I'm going to walk you guys through how to do this. Like, I just really want to showcase how these systems work and how to build this up. Because bottom line is, at the end of the day, like, of course, like, I want to provide you guys with the information on how to do this. So if you have something break or you want to change something or modify it, you know exactly how to do it. So what we want to do is we want to make an API call here. Okay. And so we need to figure out the URL to send to this embedding model. So I'm just going to go into like OpenAI embedding API and go into their documentation here. So I'm just going to go to like the second result here, read documentation. And somewhere in here, there should be the documentation on how to embed within ChatGPT. So I'm just going to type in like version 1's v1/embed. And let's just take a look and see what comes up here. Okay, so we have like this batch and create, and somewhere in here, we should have embeddings. So the endpoint is embeddings here, and we can do like create embeddings. And here we go. So we're trying to create an embedding. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring this over here. Now, effectively, we need to send to the embedding URL. And this is the exact embedding URL in their documentation under embeddings / and it's create embeddings. So how we go about doing this is we want to copy this whole URL in. And we'll paste it in here. But you'll notice that it says enter a relative path to this. And what it means by relative is it means like do not include this because it's already being included. So we're just going to go ahead and trim off what's already included and add in the ending here. And the method that we want to do, it's going to tell us it is a post method here, right? And so we can choose post. We're sending data over there for it to be processed. And by choosing post, it should automatically contain the content type application JSON. If we come back to the example of how to structure this, it asks us for the content type JSON application. You'll see it's kind of different here, but what Make is doing is it's abstracting the data so that instead of you having to program it with like these, in between the quotes and all that kind of stuff, it abstracts it. And what I mean by abstracting is it's just making it more simple for you to enter it in. So it's already done all this data, this setup for you. So we can skip over that. The next thing is the authorization. We have to put in our API key. The thing is with these make an API requests, you're making a request to the API, but it's already authenticated. So because you already connected in here, and you created your account with an API key, this is by default, it's already been authenticated. And lastly, what we want to do here is we want to copy the body here and then just paste it down in the body section. And we have the input, food was delicious or whatever. We're going to delete this. And the input that we want is actually the query that we got from the last step. So we're embedding like the search term, like wedding DJ prices, ballpark range for wedding DJ services, all that kind of stuff. And this looks good. The only other thing too that you may want to change is this model. This does work. You can do text embedding ADA 2, but I think I'm just going to switch over to what we had earlier. So just trying to search it up, which it's going to be somewhere in the documentation just to speed this up a bit. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to choose the same embedding model that we had before. So I'm going to choose the text embedding 3 small. It's the same one that we also had for the Pinecone database. Okay, we'll click OK, and we can run this, and then we'll see the results that come in when we test this data. So we're going to run the module, we'll test it, we'll see the results. Body, and we have the data, and we're going to keep drilling down here until we have these embeddings. And you can see all these numbers here, right? Like it's all these random numbers. Just circling back, you can see like this is the vector embedding. It's the same kind of numbers here. And so it's embedding the data here. And again, what this does is it's just putting it into a special code or pattern that, you know, showcases things like, for example, obviously not shape, color, and feel, but like, you know, things like that, so that a computer knows how to compare it to other things, right? So that it can be super fast at finding the exact match or relevant matches to something, like matching socks in a drawer. You don't want to match like the biggest sock to like a small running sock, right? You want to find relative or similar socks and combine them together. Okay, sweet. So that's pretty much this, the embedding part done. And all we need to do now is take that embedding code and then pull the data from the Pinecone database. So we're going to choose Pinecone here. And this time we're going to query vectors. So I'm just going to make sure I choose the right account. I think it's the second one. I really can't tell because I chose 2 names that are the exact same. I keep preaching, you know, change the names up, but I don't do it for myself. So I really should get around to doing that. We're going to choose the vector here. We're going to map it in. So instead of actually just adding an item, I'm going to map it in here. And I want to add in all of the embeddings because there's a lot here. We're adding all of these. You'll see that if you drill down, it only shows 1. By default, make only shows 1 value in an array, or an array is in a list, but there's tons of values in here. I mean, let's just take a look here. There's tons and tons and tons, and it's including all like 1,000 or 2,000 of these values. And so that's pretty much it. The only other thing I want to do is include the metadata in here. And so that's going to give us information like an ID or the content that we stored and all of that kind of stuff. So I'm going to go ahead, click save. We're going to run this once. And again, we're going to circle back here and we're going to run this module by right clicking on it and running once. And now we can take a look and see we have the results back, specifically this metadata, right? So we can see like the content is pulling in like this website page. It's like, hey, this website page is related to the price. So maybe this is a good thing to factor in to the message. Or this second bundle here has content, and this is like another particular blog post that says how much does a DJ cost per hour. So that's pretty good if you want to know the price of a DJ. And so it's pulling in all this additional information. The only thing that is worth mentioning here is the limit here. So the limit is how many different how many different results do you want to pull back? Do you want the vector database to only pull like 10 similar results, 20 similar results, 30 similar results? In this case, we have 10 results here, but I just increased it to 20. It's like playing basketball, shooting hoops. The more shots you take, the more likely you are to score, right? Or get a point. So, obviously a higher number here is going to give more examples to effectively work off of. And so that's the next section here. Now, what we want to do is we want to essentially use array aggregator, and we want to bundle all of this together. And so let me explain what this happens, but I want to explain it visually, so just bear with me here for a second. I'm going to choose the source module as Pinecone query vectors, and I'm going to choose the vector ID and the metadata here, okay? And so instead of me just rambling on about it, let me show you what this looks like, okay? I'm going to add a sleep here, run this once, and we're going to throw data in here. Run module only. So information comes in, okay? We're looking for 20 results here. And what happens is that when you have a list that contains like 20 bundles, every time it's going to go through it one by one. It's at 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. And so what's happening here is that we're running through this scenario one module at a time, one. But this module here returns 20 bundles. And because it returns 20 bundles, that means that the rest of the workflow is going to fire 20 times, one every time for every bundle. And so with this array aggregator, what we're saying is, hold on a second. We don't want to run this whole scenario 20 times. We want to run the scenario only one time moving forward. I don't want somebody to text me and then give them 20 freaking responses back. Do you think I'm freaking crazy? Like, that's going to be like psychopathic, sending somebody 20 messages back being like, hey, did you get my last message? Hey, do you still want to talk? Hey, please send me a text. Obviously, it wouldn't say that, but that's essentially what would go on. So with the array aggregator, what we're doing is we're saying, hey, we're going to merge all of these 20 results into one, and we're going to continue on so that we only send off one message at the end of the day. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to delete those tools, and I'm going to auto align to bring everything back together. So the next module we're going to do here is we're going to do something called transform to JSON. And essentially, this is going to take the whole list here, and it's going to put this list into text. If you want to know what that's going to look like, it's just going to be like this list here. This is the text that it's going to return. So instead of it being like in JSON data that we can use where like we drag and drop and we're like, okay, we want to go to metadata and pick out, different versions, and there's, for example, 20 versions listed in this array, it's just going to bundle it up and ship it off as text. So I'm going to show you what that looks like one more time. We're going to run this scenario here, and it's going to go through, and let's take a look at the results here. So instead of the results being like a list here where we can actually use this like in makes, like in make.com. So if we like drill down, instead of using it like this, the result is now just turning that into text. So this is the input and this is the output. So we're just literally taking this all and we're turning it straight into a text file. And this might look scary. And for me, this would be a nightmare to read. But just keep in mind, like, computers read this stuff all the time. If we go into developer tools here, this is like the foundation of the backbone of computers, right? So like, they're used to reading this kind of stuff all the time. This is very easy for them to read. And so this is just a nice way to turn a list or an array into text. So we're changing data types. There's multiple data types. Numbers are one, text is another. You're probably familiar with those. An array is a list. This is what that list looks like here. And we're just turning that into a text field. And so that brings us to the next module here, which is using AI to actually formulate a response so that we can send back an email or a text message or a Facebook message or whatnot. And so usually if you watch some of my other videos, I usually use critic completion. But the problem with this is that this just takes into account one message. It's generative AI where you're just creating one completion, one message, one result, one, you can think of like generative AI as generating a picture, a song, an image, text, whatever, a blog post. Problem is that we don't want to generate one response. We want a conversation dialogue. We want to make sure that we can hold a conversation that has a history and we can look at the historical context of that conversation and reply based on what's been said already. And for that reason, we're going to use message and assistant. Okay, and there's a lot of things that are important in this message and assistant section here. So first things first, we need to choose the right account and then use an assistant. If you open this up, you will not find an assistant in here, right? It should be blank. And that's okay. We just need to create this assistant. Problem is, there's nowhere on here to create that assistant. So where we're going to go is OpenAI Playground, and we're going to go to the first result here, or second result, which is OpenAI Playground. And on the left-hand sidebar here, we have assistants. And you can just create as many assistants as you want down here. And when you do, it's going to be able to be found here, right? So let's just take a look at what I wrote this assistant out to be. It says, you are an AI customer response assistant specializing in crafting professional, contextually accurate and tailored responses based on the platform where the inquiry was received. Text messages, chat, widget, email, etc. You'll also receive the stage in the customer journey that the client is at and what objective of the conversation is for business. You don't always need to push that objective. So let's talk about that for example. In most businesses, specifically service-based businesses, you're going to get leads, okay? They're going to visit a website, become a new lead. The goal is to get them from a new lead status onto a sales call. After the sales call, your goal is to do follow-up appointments. After the appointments, you want to get them to sign the contract, pay. Once they're a client, you need them to do probably some form of onboarding. Maybe you want to, have revisions and you're dealing with back and forth with revisions, or after the contract's been completed, maybe you're asking for a review and they have questions. Like, it's important to know where that customer is at the customer journey, because where they're at the customer journey is ultimately going to shape how you want to talk to them, because you're going to have the conversation you have with a lead and a customer are going to be completely different depending on where they are in the customer journey with your business. And also the objective is important too, because you need to understand where are you at and where are you going. So if you're a new lead, the goal is to get them onto a sales call. So you need to understand where they are to tailor your messaging to that stage in the customer journey, but also have an objective in mind to understand where it is that you want that person to go. What is the objective? What's the call to action? Where do we need to push this person in? So that is the reason why we should always include the stage in the customer journey. I have tons of videos breaking this down. I'll also link in the description how to set this up properly. This is a longer process and it's another video in and of itself. And so we just have additional information here, like how to provide responses via text messages, chat widgets, all of that kind of stuff. And then here's like the response back that we should get. And then you can add additional fine tuning to this model, right? So for example, if you want people to book a call on our meeting link, here it is. You can provide additional context so ChatGPT understands how to answer certain questions. And so we have this assistant AI RAG chatbot. And now we have the role, which is user, and we need to add in a message here, right? And so I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to copy this message as to what I've created here so that we can just speed up this workflow a bit faster. This is obviously going to be in the blueprints down below, and I'm going to paste this in. So lots of stuff going on here. First of all, we need to know what is the actual type of message. In this case, it's just an email. And what is the sender name and what is their email? I want to know what the subject line is if this is an email, and I want to know what the body message is. I want to know what the customer stage is, right? This is where we entered it in earlier, and what that objective is, and I want to know, and that's pretty much it. Now, we're going to provide all this information, and we're going to tell the ChatGPT the response has to be JSON. This is what the response looks like. This is a note. In JSON, JavaScript, notes or comments are denoted by 2 forward slashes, and then you can put whatever additional content you want in here. And I'm just saying, it's not going to read this and execute the code. This is just information for ChatGPT to understand this better. But I'm just going to say, please format this as a text message, email message, chat widget message. And then here's the data received from our Pinecone vector database. So again, we're going to pass in all of the JSON string here so that it understands 30 responses that the vector database gave back to us so that it gives that additional context, right? Just before we move on here, there's a couple additional things that we need to do to structure this properly. Number one is we need to show advanced settings here, and we need to go to the bottom and change this to JSON format and parse the JSON response. And then secondly, what we need to do is include that thread ID. And this is super, super important, because if you include that thread ID, if like take this customer lifecycle journey, for example, if you use this chatbot all the way through, you could have historical context from when they came in as a lead. And then 2 years, 3 years later, 4 years later, in some instances, if that is a long-term client, you could have every single conversation message built on top of it if you wanted to. And so that's a lot of data to go off to understand that person, who they are, how to respond to them. And that's really valuable, right? And so that is where this thread ID comes in. So we can create these messages. And the last thing we want to do here is we just want to have flow control, router, and we want to determine, okay, what kind of message are we sending here? So for example, this could be an email, right? And we're just going to take a look and see, hey, is this type equal to email, right? And if so, let's actually send off that particular email. So let's go ahead, and I'm going to save this. I'm going to run it one more time so that we can pull in the data necessary and continue this workflow. So run the module. And again, it's going to go through and it will hit an error here. So it's going to say no conversation is found with that thread. That's okay. We're just going to remove the thread here because it doesn't exist and you actually need to have a thread. So I'm going to remove that and run this scenario one more time, and we'll try this again. Okay, this time it's working. It's not drawing an error. And once we process this, we should be able to continue on with the workflow. So we can see the results here: subject line, message body, okay? And from here on out, we can type in email, and I wanna create a draft email. And so let's walk through this together. First things first, I'm gonna select one of my email accounts here, and we're just gonna map in all the rest of the fields here. So I want to save this to the folder drafts, okay? And the recipient of this email is going to be whoever sent it. The subject line of this email is the subject line. The content type is plain text. I don't want to deal with HTML. And we're just going to put in the message body here. Okay, perfect. And that looks good to me. And oops. More or less what we can do is we can give this a shot and see. And of course, we're going to have to redo this because we want to make sure that obviously all of these things are not hard-coded in. So I'm just going to wait for this to send off, and then we'll take a look at my email address here and see if in fact that was actually sent off. And we can see the draft here. Oops. Let's just go back, and I'm going to take a look and see. Gotcha. And you'll notice that I actually put in the wrong information here. This is what happened here was I put in this value here, which is obviously not what we want to do. We want to put in the subject line value from what we got from the vector database and what we got from ChatGPT. I was like, that seems oddly weird that it would come back with that kind of response. That's not what I was looking for at all. So let's try this one more time. We'll run this module and see if it works the second time around. Okay, it's exciting stuff. Awesome. So email has been drafted. Of course, you don't have to just draft the message. You can do whatever you want. And here we go. So pricing information for wedding services. Hey, Jono, thanks for reaching out regarding our wedding DJ services. The price for our wedding DJ services typically range from this to this, depending on a number of factors such as the DJ's experience, the duration of the service, and any additional services you may want. If you're looking for a quote that can be tailored to your specific needs, feel free to reply with more details about your event. or you can use our quote form on our website for a quick estimate. Looking forward to assisting you and making your special day unforgettable. Thanks for reaching out. Best regards, Jono. Okay, so that's obviously really, really cool, right? So that's great. Awesome, looks good. All we'd have to do here is just change back this HTTP request so that we're actually passing in things like, I don't know, the person's name here, the person's email, which is here, and then the subject line, which is this, and then the message body, which is there, right? And now this is going to work properly. Of course, you need to have the thread ID here, right? So you need a way to save this. And then you'd also need a way to save these two. And I'm just going to circle back and I'm going to talk about these three pieces of context, or these three variables in the context of a CRM, because it's just going to be a bit easier to explain. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share how you could do like the SMS bot and the chat widget bot, like I showed you at the beginning of this video. And I'm going to be using Go High Level to showcase this with you guys. You don't have to use Go High Level. You can use whatever it is you want. It's like platform agnostic. So whatever CRM floats your boat, you're more than welcome to use that. It's just, I use Go High Level. So that's what I kind of built this solution out into. And this is not a Go High Level course, or lesson. So I'm just going to showcase really, really quickly how this stuff works so that you can at least understand how to set this up for yourself, because once you know how to do this, it's really powerful stuff. So I'm just going to copy this in just to save a bit of time here. And I'm going to paste this over here and delete this. So let's walk through this. First things first, we have a filter and I labeled it CRM. And essentially the type of message here should equal SMS, or it should equal chat widget. And then it passes through here. Just like this should equal email, this has to equal chat widget or SMS. And so what we're going to do is we're going to formulate an HTTP response. And practically speaking, we send data to Go High Level through this, right? And so I'm going to circle back to this URL first. Let's talk about the data we're sending. We're sending over the message body. We're also sending over the subject line. We're also going to send over the email of the person, right? And the type of the message, which is email. And we're also going to send over that thread ID. And I'm just going to find that thread ID somewhere here, and perfect. I'm going to save this and click OK. Let's talk about this. So thread ID is essentially saving that thread history, so you always have the historical context of the conversation. The type of message is SMS, chat widget, whatever. The email here, you don't need to pass an email for text messages, obviously, or chat widgets. But with Go High Level, the interesting thing is that with Go High Level, you can find contacts in the CRM based on things like the ID of the person, which is right here, or based on their email, or based on their phone number. And so if we pass in the email here, then we can link up the client and we know exactly who it is. And then we want to pass in the subject line, the message of the body, and then we have a post. So we're sending data, we're sending this data, email, type, thread ID, results, all that kind of stuff, to this URL. So what does that URL look like? Well, practically speaking, I just set up a workflow here. I'm not going to rebuild it. I'm just going to walk through basically how this works, because this, again, is not a Go High Level tutorial. So what's going on here is we need, in order to understand this workflow, we need to understand this workflow better. So think about it this way. Client asks a question. Hey, can you tell me a good month and day to plan my wedding on a budget? And so this workflow here starts when a text message is received in the system. This text message came in, okay? And because that text message came in, we're starting this workflow. It also could be started with a live chat module, one of the two. This could be email, Facebook message, Instagram message, all that kind of stuff. And then we have an if statement. We're checking, okay, what message is this? Is this a text message, email, chat widget? And because it's a text message, right? Because this person texted us, it goes down the text message path and it sends a webhook to this URL here. And this URL, let's just make sure is accurate, should start this workflow, okay? So I'm just gonna make sure it actually starts this particular workflow here. And it does. So I'm going to click save here in a second. But this is just like we're sending data and we're sending specific data. We're sending things like if it's an email, what that person's subject line was, what that person's name is, what type of message it is, what was the body of the text message, what their email is, just so we can keep a record of the emails. Again, is representing the client. So if you pass an email, you can link it back up to that client via their email again. The thread ID, we're saving that thread ID somewhere, and we're passing it back in so it knows who it is. ChatGPT knows who it is and how to respond in the historical context. Then you can pass in things like customer stage and an objective, right? And so person replies to the person sends a message. It starts this workflow. This is the text message, starts this workflow, sends the data over to this workflow, finds the answer using Pinecone, formulates it using this ChatGPT assistant, then sends the data back into the CRM. And this time we're sending that data in this HTTP request, sending it to this exact endpoint here. And when this endpoint comes in, all we do is we just we find that client based on their email here, and we update the thread ID so that when we send that text message again, we know which thread ID it is. And so we always know, no matter if it's in Go High Level, in Make.com, we know the thread ID and we know the client, right? And no matter where the information is, we always know those two things. And so when it comes back in here, then we just send a text message based on the message that was formulated in this stage right here. So I think we're pretty much good to try this out. And I'm just going to circle back in here and we're going to walk through this together. So I'm actually just going to send over that same message up top, I guess. I'm going to copy it and say the same thing. And you'll be able to see the message come through again right here. And if we circle back, this workflow has been started. It's found information related to this. It's formulating the response. Okay. And then it's going to, sorry, just to reiterate, the message came in, it triggered this workflow because a text message was found. It sent the information here to start this workflow, found a response in Pinecone, formulated in ChatGPT, sent it back to an HTTP request in Go High Level, and then replied to me via text message. And that reply said something like this. If you have any questions or need information about our DJ services, let's chat, book a call with me here. So obviously that was not an ideal message because, I don't know, that's just not good. So, it's not perfect, but I also didn't train it on a lot of data. You can kind of see like the response back up here is a lot more indicative of what it should look like. I can try this one more time and just see. Thing is like I spent probably like 30 minutes training this data, but it should have been trained on like, lifetime or 5 years worth of data. And obviously the results will be better. So I'm glad that I'm leaving this in here because obviously it's not like a perfect solution, but we can try this one more time and see how this works. And there also might be an error here in case. So let's just take a look. It actually looks like there could be an error here. So results. And so here seems to be the error: extracting important details to summarize message, purpose, topic. And so I think what might be happening is if we look into the message, I may not have formatted it properly. And so you can see here that the subject line and the message body are empty, right? And so it wasn't the fact that the model didn't work, it was the fact that I didn't pass in the right parameters properly. So if we come back in here and we take a look and we change this to, let's say, message body and subject line, and save this and try this one more time, then these two should be created. Because right now it's not even pulling in anything related to my company because I didn't format the data properly. And so if you don't format the data properly, then you're going to get very generic responses back like you just found there, and it will never work, right? Because I didn't pass in the data. So let's try this one more time and see if this time it actually responds back with an appropriate response. So I just sent in that text message, and you can see it in real time here. And now it's coming back. It's formulating another response. We can see here that it did in fact work for the query. And now it's just going to take a couple seconds here to reply. But I can see it actually weirdly enough on my phone. It says, hey there, for a budget-friendly, okay, there we go. Hey there, for a budget-friendly wedding date, please consider a weekday at the start or end of wedding season. It can save you quite a bit. If you'd like to discuss more details or options to explore, I'd love to help. You can book a quick call with me here. And then it also, keep in mind, it knows the objective too. Like it knows what you're trying to accomplish, where the person's at in their customer lifecycle stage, what you're trying to accomplish. And so obviously this is really powerful. And you know, if you train this on enough data, it's going to be able to answer your clients or leads probably just as well as a human could, right? Because at the end of the day, you hire staff, you have to train those people and spend and invest a lot of time into them. Same kind of thing with a system like this. This is how I'd go about doing things. Of course, there's so much more that you can do. This is just kind of scratching the surface. Last thing I want to mention here is that security-wise, obviously you want to set this up in a way that you're not sending the wrong information back. So you could just have another touch point here in between where you use another ChatGPT module to say, hey, is this an appropriate response to send back to somebody? Or, you know, say respond 1 if it's an appropriate thing to send back, or 0 if it's not. So that's essentially it, guys. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you found value in this. If you did, make sure to subscribe to the channel and make sure to comment down below what you think I should be covering next time. If you need help building this out, you can reach out to my company, automatable.co, where we help people build custom solutions like this for their business. Thank you once again for watching, and I look forward to seeing you guys in the next one. Thanks, and bye-bye.